You know, there are some things that we all depend on that really don't get enough credit. I mean, where would we be without the humble rock? Think about it. The Earth's outer layer, the very ground under our feet, is made of rock. This was mankind's first technology. Since the Stone Age, the entire history of human advancement can be traced back to this little guy. We've used rock as tools, as material to build our civilizations. We've mined rock for the precious metals inside. Without rock, there would be no modern world. In short, rocks rock. Death Valley, California. Here, in a harsh, hot, and deadly terrain, mysterious natural forces are at work. Rocks appear to be moving around, totally independently, on perfectly flat ground. This strange and seemingly impossible phenomenon has defied explanation for more than 60 years. Now, Weird or What is going to put an incredible new theory to the test. The mystery unfolds 3,600 feet above sea level in a 3-mile-long dry lake bed known as the Racetrack Playa. Surrounded by mountains, the playa is home to hundreds of dolomite fragments, from tiny pebbles to 700-pound boulders, all of which cruise across this level surface in all directions, covering distances of up to a mile, leaving behind a telltale winding trail in the dirt. Park Ranger Bob Greenberg knows the rocks on his watch are moving around, but neither he nor anyone has ever actually seen it happen.
Well, people have tried to stay out. The weather's too harsh. They can't deal with the high wind, 100-mile-an-hour wind plus. It gets pretty cold out there. One reason we know before we had today's technologies they moved, there was a study done where they actually went out and put pegs next to particular rocks, and they'd come out periodically and see if it had moved. But more recently, we've put video cameras out, and either the weather kills them or someone has taken them.
But questions remain. How fast do they move? How often? How can supposedly inanimate objects be moving at all? Over the years, there have been plenty of wild theories, and Ranger Greenberg has heard them all.
There's stories, why do the rocks move? I've heard leprechauns, which I find entertaining. Some people accuse the rangers of going out and pushing them around. But we don't do that, no. Yeah, I guess possibly someone could go out there and create a hoax, but they'd have to be pretty driven to do that. I think this is graffiti. Someone has made a figure 8, probably with this rock. And I'm going to guess this one's graffitied.
Crazy explanations aside, there's no denying there's a genuine mystery afoot here. Stones that weigh anywhere from 7 to 700 pounds are sailing across a dry desert floor, and no one has ever seen it happen. Is that weird or what? So, what's going on here? Geologist Dr. Paula Messina has spent years studying the stones of Racetrack Playa and theorizing how they might be moving. She believes the answer could lie with Death Valley's strange wind patterns.
The playa itself is like a mosaic of microclimates, that we find that wind speed in one location can be as much as 6 times greater as in another location. And I've measured the wind simultaneously at different spots to know that this is true. So rocks that are fairly close to one another will do totally different things because the nature of the wind is different at different parts of the playa.
These super localized winds can reach up to 90 miles an hour. Due to the valley's unique narrow canyons and mountain passes that constrict the wind flow, causing it to accelerate dramatically.
Air is a fluid, And there are certain rules that fluids live by. And one of them is when you constrict the flow of a fluid, it speeds up. It's a little bit like putting your finger at the end of a garden hose. The water will spray out a lot faster when you do that than when you just leave the hose going. And in the racetrack, there are two topographic corridors. They're notches. They're like mountain passes. And air comes from the west to the east in the predominant motion out here in the southwest. And it's coming up from a place called Saline Valley. But it has to go through one or two of these very narrow canyons in order to get to the racetrack. So I think that the air is moving very fast when it gets through those two notches, and that amplifies the wind speed on the racetrack. So even though we may be recording winds in the area that may be only 50-mile-an-hour gusts, at the racetrack it's significantly higher.
So could this garden hose theory solve the mystery of the sailing stones? Are the rocks of the racetrack playa being subjected to some kind of natural wind tunnel? The theory has never been tested. Until now. Okay. Maybe I should leave this to the professionals.
Wow.
Bruce Barham is a science teacher with a passion for stones.
But that's a keeper.
And especially the sailing stones. Berman has been chasing the wind theory for years. Now he's ready to put it to the test by attempting to recreate the atmospheric conditions of Death Valley in a wind tunnel.
It seemed like just a logical explanation to me to take what we think happens in nature and test it on a smaller scale.
Barman can't bring a perfectly calibrated wind tunnel to the playa, so he brought the playa to the wind tunnel.
This is a mixture of sand and clay. We spread it out last night on the test bed, and then as the moisture evaporated out of this, the clay dried out and it fractured. When you go out on the playa, this is exactly what it looks like. The clay is all broken up in these little pieces and little sections, all fragmented. This is a perfect representation of what the playa looks like.
Having created the perfectly flat, dry, and cracked conditions of the playa, Barman adds the rocks, 5 of them, ranging from 1 to 20 pounds.
So let's go ahead and turn this baby on. And let's slide some rocks. We'll rock and roll. So what's our velocity now?
We're at
50. Anybody see anything moving? There goes one.
60. There goes rock number 1 rolling off.
Even with winds of over 70 miles an hour, the experiment is inconclusive. The stones roll, but they need to slide to create the distinctive tracks. And the only rocks that move are small. The biggest rocks, like those on the playa, refuse to budge. So even with winds over 70 miles an hour, the experiment is a blustery bust. The stones just don't sail. My experiment isn't working too well either. There's something missing here. But what could it be? Back on the playa, Ranger Bob thinks he has the answer.
You need rocks, wind, and some kind of lubricant.
A dusty desert valley seemingly offers little in the way of lubricant, but when the seasons change, so does the playa.
Here we are in the winter, and the temperature is very cold, and in fact, it's been raining. So even though this place gets only about 2 inches of rain a year, we're seeing a significant event in terms of the weather in Death Valley right now.
And with these rains, the usually dry lake bed becomes a shallow lake once again. So Barman brings in another variable, water.
So what we're doing now is we've tried to simulate the flooding conditions on the playa.
With a small amount of water, the stones begin to move.
Look at rock 1. Yeah, there it goes. There goes 2.
2 is starting to slide.
Yep.
And so is 4.
There goes 4. got 2 and 4 to slide at 70 miles an hour. We've kind of peaked now.
Even after adding water to the mix, the wind theory is looking doubtful. But in the most bizarre way, the extreme conditions in Death Valley could yet provide the answer. In winter, the playa's nighttime temperature drops from searing to freezing. Any water on the valley floor soon turns to ice. This fact, combined with an afternoon watching winter sports, may have led Dr. Messina to the answer.
I saw curling for the first time in one of the Winter Olympics a few years ago. It was one of those eureka moments. I thought about the rocks. I thought about, gee, this is really interesting to see how little force it takes to get something to move when there's almost no friction.
As a Canadian, I consider myself somewhat an authority on winter sports, so let's think about the marvelous mechanics of curling. A 40-pound granite rock is pushed down the ice at a target. The weight of the stone and the force applied melts just enough ice under the rock to reduce the friction to practically nothing, allowing the rock to skim across the ice at the nearest fork. So could the sailing stones of Death Valley be acting in a similar way? Could the science behind an Olympic sport explain this mystery? Back at the wind tunnel, it's time for one last try. Berman lowers the friction by turning the cracked surface of his mini playa into a makeshift curling rink.
What we're trying to simulate here is that the playa has flooded and it's been wet for several days with a shallow lake, and then on the rare occasion it froze. So we have a frozen solid surface. We're going to go ahead and get this wet with a layer of water which simulates this rare occurrence on the playa that happens with a shallow lake, freezing temperatures, frozen solid surface with a thin layer of water on it, and we're going to test this again just this way.
40, 45.
There goes one. Yeah, one at 45.
There goes rock 3.
There goes rock 3.
53. 54.
Oh, perfect! Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Beautiful! Oh, beautiful! Oh, really nice.
With a thin, slippery coat of mud now covering the ice below, the rocks sail along gracefully when hit with wind speeds known to exist in Death Valley, leaving trails in the mud identical to the ones on the playa.
This shows that if the right conditions exist in nature and all of these different components come together in the right proportions, it works, it happens. It's a logical explanation, it's not a mystery. This is science, this is what it's about.
But a mystery remains. Some trails are so twisty that even wind tunnels can't explain their erratic paths. And the stones are just as active in the summer when there is no ice to help them sail.
I don't want to get too philosophical, but it's like, yeah, there's always going to be a mystery. And when there are no mysteries, life is going to be boring, right? So, I mean, it's great that we don't have all the answers.
Our planet is a truly mysterious place filled with many phenomena that we simply cannot explain. In the USA, the hills of North Carolina are home to one such extraordinary mystery.
Look at look at it moving. Look at it moving down. It's going down the ridge. It's heading down.
Oh my God. That is smoking. Look at that. It's in the mountain.
Spooky, glowing orbs that regularly rise above the mountains and disappear into the horizon. Are these weird lights UFOs, ghosts, or even better, interdimensional beings? Let's see if we can get to the bottom of this. Northwest of Hickory, North Carolina lies Brown Mountain, a 1.5 mile long ridge on the Pisgah National Forest. Its appearance belies a strange history. The first recorded sighting of mysterious lights was reported in 1771. People have been seeing them ever since.
Oh yeah, well, there. Wow,
yeah,
see.
there it goes.
Paranormal investigator Joshua Warren grew up watching the Mountain Strange light show.
I first saw the lights when I was 12 or 13 years old. I was quite young, and I got really lucky actually because my parents took me and my sister up to the overlook to finally see if we could catch a glimpse of these fabled illuminations. So we were sitting at the overlook, and all of a sudden, this dark mountain in front of us lit up with a red, flaring light. And that light expanded, and then it dwindled, twinkled, and I was amazed because I knew that there was not supposed to be anything commercial or artificial on that mountain that could produce that kind of light. And yet, there it was, and that inspired me to discover what was happening there.
Joshua has captured this remarkable phenomenon on film many times.
I've got like 6 or 8 of them all lined up across here, folks.
God almighty.
See them all?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That, for me, was so clear, I realized there is something real happening at Brown Mountain.
Joshua has devoted his life to researching the Brown Mountain lights, and now he thinks he's discovered the truth. Until now, there have been hundreds of competing theories. Many believe the lights are produced by UFOs, the glowing orbs perhaps being some kind of alien vehicle or probe. Local resident Missy Hill has a different explanation.
I believe that the Brown Mountain Lights is a spiritually charged area. It's the spirits of the dead is what people are seeing. I believe it's probably what's called an imprint, which means something is played over and over again. It's not the same as a being manifesting. It's more just like a tape playing over and over.
Legend has it that back in the year 1200, Brown Mountain was the site of a bloody war between two Indian tribes. The death toll was huge, and it was said the heartbroken spirits of the warriors' wives still wander the mountain with lights, looking for the remains of their slain husbands. Brown Mountain isn't the only place where strange lights appear. In central Norway, strange oblong lights have been appearing over the Hesdalen Valley since the 1980s. Southeast of Marfa, Texas, unexplained lights have been reported for 200 years. Hovering balls of light seem to float above the ground, sometimes for up to hours on end. So what's going on? Are people seeing ghosts? Or can science unravel a very real mystery that has endured for hundreds of years? Ghostly wanderings aside, could there be a more run-of-the-mill explanation for the Brown Mountain lights? In 1913, the U.S. Geological Survey proclaimed the lights were train headlights from a nearby valley. Sounds plausible. However, 3 years later, a great flood swept through that valley and temporarily took out the railroad bridges, the roads, and all the power to the area. And guess what? The mysterious lights continue to appear above Brown Mountain. So can modern science find an answer to this enduring mystery? Well, it seems there are multiple explanations, including swamp gas or reflected starlight. Dan Caton, an astrophysicist who has studied the phenomena, also has a theory.
I got a lot of emails from people who had seen them, and what was particularly interesting were people who reported seeing them from several feet away. So this is not going to be a distance at which you're going to confuse things. And then I began to think that this sounded a whole lot like the reports of ball lightning.
an extremely rare phenomenon never successfully captured on film. Ball lightning is a luminous orb that can be as large as a soccer ball and can hover above the ground or move around wildly for several seconds. It has been observed occurring just before or after a lightning strike.
We don't understand ball lightning, but it has been reported for centuries and seems to be real.
But there's just one problem with this theory. Most sightings of the Brown Mountain Lights occur on clear, dry nights. No thunderstorms means no ball lightning. This is where Joshua Warren's theory comes in. He thinks the Brown Mountain Lights are similar to ball lightning, but without the lightning.
We've been able to reproduce a similar phenomenon on a miniature scale in our lab.
Now, as you can see, the stream of carbon that's floating up in the smoke has ignited this ball of plasma at the top of the jar.
Well, it's easy enough in the lab, but to produce the effect in nature requires a source of energy. Energy that Joshua believes is coming from Brown Mountain itself.
And we're trying to measure any kind of strange electromagnetic interference that might be produced by the anomalous lights, just to see if they will create some type of interference that, say, a conventional light, maybe from a campfire or a lantern, would not produce. Let me test for some radio microwaves.
Gotcha.
Joshua claims to have detected erratic surges in the natural levels of electrical current running through the ground.
And we think that could be because the mountain stores up electricity over time and then discharges it. These discharges intersect at various angles that all come together to create what looks like a ball of light.
According to Joshua, Brown Mountain could be acting like a giant electrical capacitor, storing a constant trickle of static electricity between its rock strata and then discharging it quickly in very large bursts strong enough to turn the air into a plasma. Plasma is a superexcited form of ionized gas that has released its electrons. Our sun is a massive ball of plasma, and closer to home, plasma is used to light up fluorescent tubes and flat-screen plasma TVs. Joshua has designed an experiment, he says, proves the Brown Mountain Lights are plasma balls caused by the mountain itself.
So, we have a special plasma tube that we have created to try to reproduce what might be happening at Brown Mountain on a miniature scale. This tube is made of clear acrylic, and we have a primary electrode and a secondary electrode. What makes it most interesting is that we have this array of third electrodes here on the side, and they reproduce some of the angles that we get from the slope of Brown Mountain to see how these interactions might come together and give us some type of an interference pattern that makes something like ball lightning hover in the middle of that tube. And so we have this hooked on a vacuum pump. The reason we've done that is because we cannot recreate the amount of voltage happening in Mother Nature at Brown Mountain. So to compensate for that, by taking some of the air out of here, the voltage we do have will become enhanced and act more like it would in nature at higher voltages. We have a DC power supply. This power supply is going to be producing about 1200 volts of DC, 10 to 25 milliamps, and it's going to take it a second for us to reach our maximum vacuum we need for this experiment, which is about 2 millitorr worth of pressure. I'm going to apply some voltage. If we were looking at, say, a cliff on Brown Mountain, this bottom wire would represent one discharge coming from a shelf of earth. The top wire would represent the atmosphere, which has its own charge. The third wire would represent another charge coming from another spot on the cliff that happens to intersect with that original charge. It's that intersection that gives you the spin that gives you what looks like a blob. So we're looking at a representation of the atmosphere and two shelves of the Earth. Right now you can see a plasma ball that's hovering between these three electrodes. And we have created this by reproducing many of the conditions at Brown Mountain. Therefore, we think that a Brown Mountain light is very similar to the type of plasma that you're seeing that appears to be hovering in the middle of this tube, but actually is just part of a much larger electrical system.
Plasma created in a lab does seem to appear strikingly similar to the mysterious lights witnessed on Brown Mountain. Joshua is confident he's found the answer.
The moment that I saw that ball of light appear hovering between those electrodes, I understood so many things all at once that I never understood before.
I think we have a lot to learn still about the way our planet works. That's why it seems to me it's valuable to try to see if we can recreate these things that happen that we cannot explain.
But the Brown Mountain lights are so unpredictable and rare that studying them scientifically is virtually impossible. For the foreseeable future, it seems this remarkable mystery will remain weird. What? In the remote mountains of northern Mexico, a little-known tribe is redefining our knowledge of the limits of human endurance. They can run up to 435 miles, 16 times further than a marathon in just over 2 days. How could this be possible? Experts are attempting to uncover the secrets to their superhuman ability. Is it unique, or do we all have it? Finding the answer could change the future of medical science. Is that weird, or what?
Oh, I could imagine running a marathon over 26 miles. I can hardly make it around the block. Oh, yeah. Today's elite marathon runners are quite an incredible bunch. But then again, they do have the most sophisticated modern training available. Advanced nutrition programs, state-of-the-art facilities, physiotherapy, sports psychologists, world-class coaches, everything to help them push their bodies to the extremes of what's humanly possible. But what if I told you there's a mysterious and virtually unknown group of people who, with no formal training, can literally run circles around most Olympians? Completely normal men and women who can run the equivalent of not 1, but 10 marathons back to back with a hangover.
In the remote Sierra Madre Mountains of northwest Mexico lies Copper Canyon, a rugged region home to a tribe called the Tarahumara, or the running people. The Tarahumara have inhabited this terrain for 500 years. The name comes from their superhuman ability to run superhuman distances without running shoes. How do they do it? Chris McDougall is a former marathon runner. He is astonished by the Tarahumara's extraordinary endurance.
I just assumed it was a simple trick. You just do one thing and you're good to go. And then when I started to look into the tribe, I realized that this guy was not unique, that this is an entire tribe of people that can run distances well beyond 100 miles. They routinely run 200, 250 miles at a time. And not just some people, but all of them, men and women, old and young alike. There are men in their 70s and 80s who are still running 150 miles at a time.
Remarkably, the tribe record for the single longest run is a staggering 435 miles in just over 48 hours. 435 miles is the equivalent of running from New York to Cleveland, Ohio. To run this distance over 16 times further than a marathon in one session defies belief. But even more remarkable is how they do it.
Either barefoot or these thin homemade sandals made out of either deer skin, or whenever people like chuck old tires down in the canyons, they'll actually scamper out, salvage the tires, and cut them into sandals.
So, men and women capable of feats of endurance that seem impossible, long distance runners at the very pinnacle of athleticism. So now, this is the point in the story where I'm supposed to scratch my head and say, oh my, is that weird or what? How can the Tarahumara people be doing what they do? But perhaps the really weird thing, and the actual question to be asking here is, why can't the rest of us, normal folk, do what the Tarahumara do? I mean, why can't I run hundreds of miles at a time? What? To look for answers, let's talk to the experts. Sports nutritionist John Barati thinks that their remote environment plays an important role in their extraordinary ability.
These individuals run as an integral part of their culture. They run for survival, they run for inter-village communication, and they run for sport.
The Tarahumara live to run. They regularly compete in 200 or 300 mile races through rugged mountainous terrain. Delivering mail, they can run up to 500 miles in a week.
So you can imagine if you lived in a culture where running was the only means of athletic expression, and you had to run for survival as well, you'd actually get pretty good at running.
So how do the Tarahumara run these superhuman distances? Could diet be the answer? During a 26-mile race, an average marathon runner will burn around 2,600 calories. To endure this distance, their bodies need to consume large amounts of carbohydrates, like those found in sports drinks. Carbohydrates are stored as glycogen in the muscles and are gradually converted to energy. But on a 435-mile run, it's estimated, the Tarahumara can burn up to a staggering 43,000 calories. Where do they get this energy? Chris McDougall studied the Tarahumara diet. He was astonished at what he found.
They drink like crazy, particularly at harvest time. They do a thing called tezguinadas, and tezguinadas are just full-on, anything goes, drink till you die raves. It actually serves a purpose. When you live in a culture where everyone relies on his or her neighbor, you can't afford to have grudges and resentments. So every once in a while, you need to sort of blow off steam and get it all out of your system.
During harvest and before races, the Tarahumara consume large amounts of a corn beer called tesquino. Could this be the key to the extraordinary endurance of the Tarahumara?
They actually may be increasing their hydration status and their glycogen status with this corn beer. It's very high in carbohydrate and the alcohol content is low. It's actually been estimated that it would take about 4 liters to get intoxicated using their corn beer or their corn beverage. So if you think about it, the amount of carbohydrates that would come with that and the amount of just simple fluid load would be very high.
Amazingly, loading up on high-carb beer before a race may help the Tarahumara, but this alone can't explain their incredible long-distance abilities. So what is it then? What makes them so special? Well, apparently nothing. They just never stopped doing something that, once upon a time, we all did. To uncover the incredible truth, we need to go back in time and delve into humanity's evolutionary history. Dan Lieberman thinks the answer might be found in humanity's shared evolutionary history.
The Tarahumaro's abilities to run really long distances really comes from our evolutionary history as hunters. We live in a world that's so different from the world for which we evolved that we have lost a lot of those abilities.
Hundreds of thousands of years ago, early human hunters had to pursue their prey over long distances. They would literally chase the animals until they died of heat exhaustion. It's called persistence hunting and is still practiced by the Tarahumara today.
What you do is you run at a speed that makes an animal gallop. Most quadrupeds, the way they cool down is by panting. When an animal gallops, it can't pant. So it slowly heats up and heats up and heats up. But we, of course, cool by sweating. So if you can chase an animal, make it gallop for 10 or 15 minutes when it's really hot, that animal will die.
Evolution has provided humans with many ways to endure long distances. Were we born to run?
You know, starting 2 million years ago, we evolved these abilities to run very long distances in order to hunt. And we have features all throughout our bodies, literally from our heads to our toes, that help us run long distances, both in terms of storing up and releasing mechanical energy, in terms of cooling, in terms of recruiting energy and storing energy. And what the Tarahumara have done is they've kind of kept those mechanisms, and they keep developing them as they grow up. Most of us have those abilities, it's just that we don't use them.
With little or no need for exercise, Dan believes our modern lifestyle is to blame.
Why would you want to persistence hunt nowadays? I mean, we can go to our supermarket, we can buy our meat, fully packaged in a container with, wrap all over it. And in fact, for the last maybe 50 or 100,000 years, people probably didn't have to do that very much because of the invention of the bow and arrow. So this kind of hunting is probably very ancient and has become much less common probably over the last 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years. Nobody's exactly sure when.
So it turns out that the Tarahumara are just doing what any of us was designed to do by evolution. Run. Our bodies were honed over hundreds of thousands of years to be the perfect long-distance endurance machine. But what use is having such a formidable tool if you don't know how to use it properly? You see, there is still one crucial thing that separates them from us. Technique.
When we started studying barefoot running and minimalist shoe running, we learned that there are some interesting aspects to the way that Tarahumara run that may be actually of some use to us.
The Tarahumara don't use conventional running shoes. They run in thin, homemade sandals called huaraches, or they run completely barefoot. Could this be the answer to their superhuman abilities? Sports scientist Dr. Irene Davis suspects that because the Tarahumara run without shoes, they run differently than most modern marathon runners, and that this may be the key to their amazing endurance. It's time to put this theory to the test.
We're going to start you up and we're going to have you walk just to kind of get you warmed up, and then we'll break it into a run. And I want you to just land your natural type of a landing. We're going to collect some data with you running naturally.
Wearing running shoes, the test subject lands on his heel first, then the rest of the foot connects. In runner's terms, this is called a heel strike, and it's long been considered the ideal running style. But the experiment's results offer a different perspective.
This is a skeleton depiction of you running. Okay. And that red arrow is actually the ground reaction force as it goes through your heel and through your foot and actually up through your center of mass. Over here on this graph, what you're seeing is this is the ground reaction force as you land. What's interesting about this is that you've got a very distinct impact peak. This impact is the area that we think might be related to injury. Okay. Okay, so you can see that with each foot strike, you get this impact peak. Okay. Okay?
The test suggests that when we run in shoes, there is more impact on our legs and feet, increasing our chance of injury. And that's because the extra support running shoes provides actually prevent our muscles from doing their job properly.
the shoes are over supportive, then the muscles aren't working so hard. And if the muscles become weak, then you're going to have a greater tendency to get injured as well.
But is there a difference when the subject runs in bare feet?
So Jason, are you thinking about the way that you're landing, or are you just letting your feet land the way they want to naturally land?
I'm letting my feet naturally land the way they want to land. I feel I'm definitely landing more mid-foot, forefoot. I mean, there's definitely less impact.
Now we're looking at you running barefoot. You can see that you're not landing so much on your heel. Do you see that you have a less distinct impact peak?
I think it's, you know, it's crazy that how much the force, the impact, how much less impact there was.
In the end, it seems that Tarahumara's secret isn't a secret at all. It's their birthright. And apparently, ours too. Could we all be superhuman if we ran without shoes? Probably not. But finding the answer to the mysteries of the Tarahumara's remarkable endurance may take us a step closer to understanding the secrets of the human body.
I think there's an enormous amount that we can learn from people like the Tarahumara, because they teach us about how our bodies were designed to function. They teach us about basic human capabilities, right? We still think it's extraordinary that they can run so far. But actually what they teach us is that it's actually normal that we can run so far.
So, 3 bizarre mysteries, yet many possible explanations. Spookiness in Death Valley. Rocks and stones moving around the flat desert floor without human or animal intervention. But how? An elaborate hoax? Aliens? Or are these rocks just acting like natural curling stones? Mysterious lights spotted for hundreds of years on a U.S. mountain. Are they the spirits of long-dead Native Americans? Are they simply campfires? Or is the mountain itself conjuring a fantastic natural phenomenon? In Mexico, a remote tribe capable of running hundreds of miles at a time. How can this be possible? Is it their diet? Their choice of footwear? Or are the Tarahumara simply doing what all our early ancestors did? Were humans born to run? You decide. 1 minute. I'm sorry, I couldn't put this book down, The Time Machine, written in 1895 by H.G. Wells. With this one book, a hot new science fiction genre was born, the time travel story. Now, of course, there are endless books, and films, and TV shows on the subject, and the mind-boggling paradoxes of journeying across time. Great stuff. Shame the concept of time travel is just fiction, isn't it? On July 15th, 2006, famed science fiction author Whitley Strieber, best known for his books The Hunger and Communion, was out at the theater with his wife Anne and her friend Starfire Tor. Little did they know what would happen that night would rival anything found in Whitley's books.
Nothing seems impossible to me anymore. I haven't talked about it very much.
After dinner, Anne and her friend went into what they thought was an empty ladies' room.
Well, it's a very small room, about 10 by 12. There was nobody in that room except for Anne Strieber and myself.
So I was standing on these steps. No one went in it after the two of them went in it. And I was watching the entire time.
Anne was a little bit before me, and she left and said she would wait for me outside.
So I went outside, stood in front of the door, waiting for Starfire.
As I slightly rounded the corner, coming out of the stall, a woman just materialized.
Whoa!
She didn't seem to understand where she was. She seemed confused, and then she just left the room.
While I was standing there, a woman came out.
I go out the door to the ladies' room, and Anne Strieber rushes up to me, very, very excited. She says, A lady came out, but she didn't go in. A lady came out, but she didn't go in.
This was pretty amazing because we knew no one was in there when we went in. So how could someone have come out who was never in there in the first place?
No one, absolutely no one, went in that bathroom.
Who was this mysterious woman? And how could she have appeared from nowhere? For the eyewitnesses, this is no ghost story. For them, the answer is much weirder.
Something altered the timelines. We were brought together like a bad edit of a film, and that's how we almost collided.
Right. 2 women go into an empty bathroom and 3 women come out. Is it really possible this mystery woman slipped through from another time? Is that weird or what? I'd say that's the weirdest. Weird or what yet. Yeah, it's pretty far out, but remarkably, time travel may indeed be possible. And proof could soon be found in a 17-mile tunnel deep underground at the border of France and Switzerland. This is the Large Hadron Collider, a 17-mile-long tunnel designed to smash atoms together in an attempt to recreate conditions that last existed just before the Big Bang, when the universe was less than a trillionth of a second old. Scientists at the LHC are trying to understand what happened in that critical moment to make our universe what it is. By solving this, they hope to shed light on some of the most fundamental unanswered questions in physics.
With the Large Hadron Collider, perhaps one day we'll be able to answer these cosmic questions. What happened before the Big Bang? Is it possible to go through a black hole? Can you bend time into a pretzel? We're now entering the cusp of human progress. 100 years ago, think how primitive we are. 100 years from now, think of how advanced computers, artificial intelligence will be. Right now, we're at the most interesting point in human history, the cusp, when we're going to rocket through the universe.
A complete understanding of how the entire universe is really constructed might enable future physicists to find a way to manipulate the fabric of space-time itself and travel into the past or future. But can we really manipulate time? To find out, we first need to investigate time itself. Isaac Newton imagined time as an arrow, always traveling straight forward in one direction. But then Albert Einstein came along and said that time is more like a river that can meander, flow at different speeds, and even eddy back upon itself.
Now we look at a river and we think of the spot on the river where we are is something like the present moment. And then upstream from us is the future. This is coming towards us. It's relentless. It's sort of inevitable. In a moment, what was up there is going to be here. And downstream from us, we can think of as the past. So these are events that have already happened. So there you have it. You've got the future, you've got the present moment, you've got the past.
Is it possible to go against the flow of time into the future? Or move even further downstream into the past? Going back in time is simple, theoretically. All we need to do is beat light to its destination, travel faster than light speed. How fast is that? Well, as Albert Einstein figured out, light travels at a fixed and constant speed throughout the universe of 186,000 miles per second. And the space shuttle can travel around 5 miles per second, so we have a bit of a problem. But our hopes of meeting our ancestors aren't over yet. Modern physicists have built on Einstein's theories and discovered that although we may not be able to beat light in a head-to-head race, we might be able to cheat and take a shortcut. Going back in time is simple, theoretically. To do this, a time traveler would need to bend the fabric of space, connecting 2 distant points to create a theoretical tunnel through space and time known as a wormhole.
There are 2 parallel universes. Perhaps it might be possible to build a gateway between these universes, a wormhole, a shortcut, like the looking glass of Alice. Think of Alice in Wonderland. She had a looking glass and she put her hand through it, and her hand went to the other side of forever. That is a wormhole.
But could we manipulate the very fabric of time and space?
If we have something called negative matter or negative energy, it might be possible to build a gateway to another universe, a gateway to another point in space or time. Now, of course, in science fiction, we have the dilithium crystals of Star Trek. People talk about spice. People talk about other exotic chemicals that will open these gateways. Well, I'm a physicist. To us, it's negative matter or negative energy. Negative energy we can actually create in the laboratory. It's already been done, but only in microscopic quantities. Negative matter we've never seen before. If we can find a negative matter meteorite in outer space, just perhaps, maybe we can harness it to open a gateway to another universe.
The only problem is the amount of energy required to punch a hole to the other side of the universe is impossible for us to achieve with our current technology.
The trick is to assemble enough positive and negative energy in order to rip open the fabric of space and time. That's really hard. We're talking about the energy of a black hole, the energy of a star, in order to bend time into a pretzel.
What do you mean it's impractical to go back in time? Can't make a wormhole. What's wrong with these eggheads? Okay, so traveling into the past might be a tad beyond our reach, but here's something surprising. Most physicists believe it's possible, relatively easy in fact, to travel into the future.
How do you exploit Einstein's theory of relativity to travel into the future? Well, it turns out it's not that hard to do. Now, it's hard from an engineering point of view. You just need a really fast spaceship, which we don't have. But if you had one, here's what you do. You just go on a long journey and come back home.
Remarkably, this is possible because time behaves differently when an object or person travels at high velocity. It's called time dilation.
If you move fast enough, your clock will disagree from a clock that's been left at home. A similar thing can happen if you spend a lot of time in a strong gravitational field, like near a black hole, for example.
This amazing feat has actually already been accomplished. Russian cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev has spent more time in space than any other human being. From 1988 to 2005, Krikalev spent 803 days orbiting the Earth at high speed. At times, Krikalev was traveling at 17,000 miles per hour. Nowhere near the speed of light, but fast enough to travel forward in time.
It's only about 1/50th of a second, so it's almost too small to even notice. But he has aged just a little bit less than, let's say, if he had had a twin brother who had stayed on the ground. He's just a little bit younger than his brother would have been.
Using this theory, it may be possible to travel thousands of years into the future.
Imagine traveling all the way around the circumference of the Milky Way galaxy, our galaxy. Now, it's very big. It's about 150,000 light years around. So it's going to take a long time. You start accelerating at a rate of 1g, which is the normal force of gravity that you feel just sitting here. So you have this very mild acceleration, but you keep it up long enough, you're eventually going very fast. When you get halfway around, you start decelerating, and after many, many more years, you end up back on Earth where you started from. Here's the thing. To someone who has stayed at home and just watched you go and is waiting for your return, they have a long wait because it's going to take 150,000 years before you come back. But for you, from your point of view, on board this spaceship, only 23 years will have passed.
So, although it seems impossible, time travel is, theoretically at least, real. And the Large Hadron Collider could yet witness science fiction become functioning science fact.
In some theories where there's extra dimensions of space, in addition to the three that we see, little compact, tiny dimensions, extra dimensions of space, there's a speculative idea that they may be able to make a mini black hole in the Large Hadron Collider.
So is it possible the mystery figure that appeared that night in Los Angeles was really a time traveler? Perhaps even from a future where science had finally answered the secrets of the universe and were now able to manipulate time? Could be.
We physicists believe that if time travel is possible, all the paradoxes can be resolved if a parallel reality opens up and there are no contradictions. You simply change the past of another universe. This also means that perhaps in the future, our descendants may have the energy and the ability to create a time machine. So one day, if somebody knocks on your door and claims to be your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter, don't slam the door.
Is that weird or what? A mysterious set of stone structures in rural New Hampshire. Could this be a place of pagan worship and human sacrifice thousands of years old?
The astronomical alignments are one of the key pieces of evidence the site is ancient.
Does this mean ancient Europeans crossed the Atlantic thousands of years before Columbus?
So it really does open up a whole different way to look at North American history.
What is this place? Who built it? And what could its existence mean for America?
Truth in history, it would seem, is a sliding scale. The facts that we know today may all crumble away with discoveries of tomorrow, and those discoveries are often to be uncovered in the most unlikely of places. For example, could an innocent-looking pile of rocks tucked away in the corner of a farmer's field in the northeastern United States challenge everything we think we know about American history? What if the first European to arrive in North America wasn't Christopher Columbus or even a Viking? What if, instead of coming to New England in search of religious freedom, the first European settlers came to practice human sacrifice?
In Salem, New Hampshire, a mysterious grouping of megalithic stones standing 14 feet high surround a compound that houses a maze of 8-foot-long chambers and crypts set into the ground. The centerpiece, a huge stone slab that looks like a sacrificial table. This is Dennis Stone. His family has owned the site for 3 generations, and he has an amazing theory. Stone believes that this is the oldest man-made structure in the entire United States.
America's Stonehenge may be one of the more important archaeological sites in the Western Hemisphere. There are different theories of who built the site. If it is in fact ancient and was built by old world people, this would demonstrate that people crossed the Atlantic Ocean a few thousand years before Christopher Columbus or even the Vikings came to America.
Sounds crazy, doesn't it? The very idea that explorers predating Columbus by millennia might have crossed the Atlantic and made America their home? Well, before you dismiss the idea, consider this. It was only in 1960 that the Norwegian archaeologist Anne Ingstad was ridiculed when she proposed her idea that Vikings had settled North America in the 12th century. But it turned out to be true. Ingstad's discovery changed history, and the Viking settlement she found in Newfoundland, Canada, is now an official World Heritage Site.
Could this structure have been built by mysterious ancient travelers? Stone believes similarities between his site and archaeological sites in Europe hold the key to uncovering the truth.
We have a couple of chambers here that are very reminiscent of chambers found in France, Ireland, Spain, the Netherlands. One of the purposes we know of is that they were used for astronomical alignments with the sun, moon, and stars. And there are just stone markers. The sun would rise or set over these stones, so the moon would do the same thing. And this may have been tied into the religious ceremonies, the longest day of the year, the shortest day of the year, or the equinoxes. And there's also stones that align with cross-quarter days, days in between the seasons. The ancient Celts and other cultures actually set up stones which would mark these times.
The Celts, a diverse group of tribes that dominated much of Central Europe until around 1600 years ago. Stone remnants of Celtic structures, including elaborate burial chambers, can be found all over Europe. It has also been suggested that the Celts were involved in the construction of England's most famous ancient megalith, Stonehenge, a site some believe was created as a giant astronomical tool, its stones aligned to the solstice positions of the sun and moon. Did Celts come and settle America 1,000 years before Columbus?
In the 1970s, Barry Felligan, a professor at Harvard, stumbled upon a stone carved here on site, and the kind of writing that was on the stone, something called Iberian Punic. The Iberian Peninsula area at that time housed the Celts.
David Brody is an amateur archaeological researcher. He supports the idea that the Celts, not Columbus, were the first Europeans to reach the New World.
We think of the Celts as being from Ireland, but actually they originated in Central Europe and then went down to the Iberian Peninsula. But it's the Celts leaving the Iberian Peninsula region that I think came over here and established the site at America's Stonehenge.
This place is becoming weirder and weirder by the minute. So who the heck was it hanging around these woods all that time ago? And what were they doing? Could this site in New England share the same purpose as the original Stonehenge in Old England? A prehistoric monument of huge, carefully aligned stones assembled by ancient Britons for some mysterious pagan purpose? If the Celts did build this American Stonehenge as a religious site, then Dennis Stone has some striking ideas as to what ceremonies would have been performed here.
I'm standing next to the sacrificial table. It's one of the main features at America's Stonehenge. This table measures about 9 feet in length, 6 feet in width, and it sits on 4 stone legs. On the surface of the stone, there's a rectangular cutout or a groove that's been made on the surface, and it has a little runoff. So if a ceremony of some type was taking place, a fluid could run through the channel and then run off the stone into a vase, perhaps.
Although little is directly known of the Celts' religious practices, the Romans who fought them, and even Julius Caesar himself, often described how Celtic druids or priests carried out human sacrifice to honor their many pagan gods. The discovery of various ancient sites of ritualized murder in Europe may support this. The stone table in Salem also has another, even more bizarre feature Dennis Stone calls an oracle tube.
This tube goes through about 8 feet, comes out underneath the sacrificial table. The voice would project out under the table during a ceremony, perhaps, and people would hear the voice and think it was a god or spirit talking to them.
I am the god of the underworld. I accept your sacrifice. Remember, always obey the priest.
When we find these large, elaborate stone structures, historically, they were done to honor gods for religious purposes, whether it's the pyramids or Stonehenge in England or Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. When ancient man went to the effort to build something this elaborate, it was done for religious purposes. And again, that takes me back to the Celts, perhaps 500 BC. That's the type of thing that they did all over Europe at that time and would have done here if they came to America.
America settled by Iron Age Europeans. It's an explosive theory, but not one exactly shared by many experts.
Research since the 1940s has shown there's a great deal of differences between what we find in Ireland and what is found at this site. There are major differences in the architectural styles. There are differences in the engineering of how the buildings are put together.
An expert in prehistoric stone structures, James Gage, also believes that an ancient civilization built this place, but based on carvings in the stone themselves, his theory is that the structure was created by a more local people, Native Americans.
First and foremost is the large number of Native American artifacts that have been found at the site. And these artifacts range from scrapers and projectile points, stuff we normally expect, to paint cups and rubbing stones. This evidence also includes clay pottery that they were actually manufacturing on site. There was a small wetlands area where they were able to actually mine the clay, and adjacent to it they had a small area where they were making the pots and firing them. One of the more interesting features about this site is it has a number of peck grooves, chipped out stone basins, and they're all been created by pecking out the stone using a hammerstone. And this pecking technique is very distinctive to the Native Americans. The Celtic culture was a fairly advanced civilization. It had metal tools, they were making gold artifacts. We would expect them to use more advanced technology other than just simple hammerstones.
The Native American theory makes obvious sense, but not according to David Brody.
It is possible that the Native Americans did build the America Stonehenge site. It would have been out of the ordinary for them to have done so, so I'm not inclined to think they did. They didn't typically, Native Americans in this area of the country did not typically build with stone. They had stone tools, and they used stone to build their hearths, but they didn't build these elaborate structures typically out of stone. Once in a while we see a sweat lodge, but there's too many of these chambers here. In addition, the Native American tribes, although a lot of their history has been wiped out in the New England region, they don't take ownership of this site like they take ownership of other sites that they believe they did build. So I'm not going to tell you that they didn't do it, but I think the weight of the evidence is more in favor of some kind of ancient seafaring European civilization.
So while these experts can't agree which ancient civilization built the American Stonehenge, another archaeologist, Kenny Feder, believes whoever is responsible wasn't ancient at all.
Celts in New England 3,000 years ago? I don't think so, but okay. Archaeological sites where people were so neat that they picked every stinking artifact up and left no physical evidence behind? Not bloody likely.
Okay, it looks like we're back to square one. So who could it have been that built those incredibly weird structures? Was it the Celts? Unlikely. The Native Americans? Maybe not. Well, how about another slightly less romantic theory? What if it was assembled by a couple of drunken 18th century farmers?
If America Stonehenge is what I think it is, which is 19th century idiosyncratic structures, that doesn't make it any less important than if it's a 3,000-year-old site with Celts traipsing around in southern New England. Makes it of different significance, but I don't think it makes it less significant. It just makes it different.
Feder's theory is the structures were constructed by the descendants of the Celts, the better-known European settlers that came in the centuries after Christopher Columbus, bringing with them traditional ways of building stone structures.
Yeah, damn right. They were Celts. But they were Celts from the 1800s and 1700s, because those are the people who moved here.
Good point, but can't the more recent Celtic immigration theory explain the existence of the site's most macabre and enigmatic-looking object? Why does American Stonehenge appear to have a sacrificial table?
Look at the names of the towns, for example, in New Hampshire, around where America Stonehenge is located, the towns and the counties. Places like Londonderry. Well, why is it called Londonderry? Because the people who lived here were from Great Britain. They were Celts. These stones are found actually throughout New England, so you're sort of left with a choice. Either there's this like widespread practice of human sacrifice throughout New England, or we got something else going on, and I think it's something else that's going on. If you Google limestone or cider press stone, you'll actually come up with some antique sites where they'll sell you stones like that. The deal is, if you know something about historical technology, about historical process, we do know that the stones like that are found throughout New England. They were used for a number of kind of mundane purposes, not sacrificing people, but in fact making apple cider or producing lye soap. The deal is that an artifact like that, an object like that, is something that we, in the modern world, we suffer from kind of cultural amnesia. We don't press our own cider. We don't make lye soap anymore. And so the objects, the artifacts from that period that any little kid would be able to tell you, oh yeah, we use that for making soap. Today, it's mysterious.
So are the drainage grooves on the 4-ton stone table actually for apple juice, not human blood? It may be the most plausible theory, but the mystery of the American Stonehenge cannot be cleared up quite so neatly. Charcoal pits at the site have been carbon dated and believed to be more than 2,000 years old. And Dennis Stone still believes his site is proof that an ancient people commemorated the coming of the solstices here, exactly as they may have done at the real Stonehenge.
The astronomical alignments are one of the key pieces of evidence that the site is ancient. The alignments do not work today. They're off a certain amount due to the Earth's tilt changing. In 1977, we took 4 years' worth of survey data. We sent it to the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Cambridge, Mass. They ran it through the computer, and they said that if these were used for astronomical purposes, they would work about 1800 BC, plus or minus about 200 years. We have taken carbon datings on the hilltop, about 16 of them. In the main site, which is where we're standing right now, the oldest carbon dating was 4,000 years old. This agrees pretty closely to the astronomical data and results.
American Stonehenge could be proof that ancient Europeans traveled to North America thousands of years before Columbus. Or it could be a rare example of Native American stone building. Or it's just a really weird apple cider factory built by colonial farmers. Only one thing is for certain. The origins and purpose of American Stonehenge remains a mystery. Is that weird? Or what? Most people don't believe this. But I have a real green thumb. The secret to my success? I talk to my plants, I stroke them, and I give them a little tender, loving care. Why? Because I believe plants, like humans, are emotional beings. They have feelings just like you and I do. They love, they fear, they can be affectionate, and they can communicate. You don't believe green matter has gray matter? No? Well, watch this. Of all the many different organisms that are on the planet Earth, common sense dictates that mammals are the most advanced, capable of thought, reasoning, and emotions. But shocking new evidence suggests that plants may possess these abilities as well. And even more mysterious, they may have the power of ESP. Is this science fiction? Or science fact? Researchers attempt to establish interspecies communication. Is that weird or what? Our story begins in Italy, where Carlo Schignazzi runs a 24-acre vineyard in the Tuscan hills. A music lover, Carlo was well known to serenade his grape pickers with an accordion. But in 2002, Carlo would stumble upon the true amazing power music could have when, as an ecologically friendly way of controlling pests from ruining his crop, Schignazzi placed loudspeakers all around his vineyard to play 24-hour-a-day classical music. The pests were frightened away, but that's not all. Something else happened, something bizarre. The grapevines nearest the speakers grew 50% larger than the rest of the crop, matured more quickly, and even grew towards the source of the music.
It's fantastic to see. It's impossible to believe. The bunches are 4 times more. For example, they leave 2 times more. So the sound is like light.
So why is this happening? Is there a logical explanation, or is the reason far stranger? Could the soaring sounds of Bach and Mozart's delicate ditties revolutionize the way we treat our greenery? Researchers discovered that popular tracks such as Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Waters and Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony improved milk yield in dairy cows by as much as 1 liter per day. Why? Because calming music was found to reduce stress in the animals. Happy moos equals more milk. Could something similar be happening with plants? Could relaxed grapes with impeccable musical taste ripen quicker? Could plants have an intelligence science has yet to fathom? Botanist Dr. Jaideep Mathur says that the grapevine's response to music can be simply explained.
Basically, we are talking about vibrations. Plants are able to exhibit primary perception, where they can pick up happenings from their surroundings, and that can be read out as electrical impulses. As far as classical music is concerned, perhaps there are certain tones, certain timbre, certain levels of vibration that plants are more responsive to in that particular music.
Sound waves are vibrations in the air made up of different frequencies. The vibrations caused by the sound of music can be felt by the plants in their leaves or in the soil. Research suggests that plants may respond to music by increasing the expression of the genes, stimulating growth. So do plants just feel music rather than hearing it? Is the perceived wrath of grapes or joy just a boring biological response based on sound vibrations? Maybe. But Susan Dudley, a plant evolutionary ecologist, has another theory for why Carlo's grapevines grow so dramatically. And it may have something to do with how the plants in the vineyards are related to each other.
Every plant has a mother and a father. And the vineyard in Tuscany could be doing better because they're planted next to their siblings. For some plants, we know the plants do better when they're planted next to their siblings. And what my research does is show a possible mechanism for that they're not producing these competitive behaviors when they're with their siblings. So that's a plausible theory.
To create a consistent grape, most vineyards use cuttings from healthy plants, then graft them onto rootstock. This means that often, most of the vines in a given field are genetically related clones.
I went looking to see whether plants could recognize who their relatives were and behave differently with those relatives. What we found is that plants respond differently to liquid in which other seedlings had been in. So you put a seedling in the liquid, you take it out, you put your test seedling in, and you measure it. And it will grow more roots if that first seedling was a stranger, but it won't grow more roots if that first seedling was a sibling. And we had a control where we just lifted them out, put them back in again. So we definitely see that there's something soluble, some kind of chemical maybe that the roots probably put into the liquid that they're responding to, but we don't know what it is.
Plants compete for limited resources like sunlight, nutrients, and water, meaning there are winners and losers in this equation. Dudley's research has shown that when certain plants grow beside their kin, they work together for mutual survival and are more likely to all do well.
With a winery, usually vintners are planting all the same kind. They're not planting very different kinds together, so rather than better sharing because they're different, they might be sharing better because they're less competitive with each other.
Okay. Maybe I am barking up the wrong tree. Sorry. Seriously. What if the grapes of Tuscany and plants in general don't ripen or respond or grow tall and healthy because they love music? What if it's because they love each other? But can this sibling explanation sufficiently solve the mystery in the Italian vineyard? Family ties may make the vines grow better, but why would only some vines grow toward the speakers? Could the answer be far stranger than anything even science fiction writers might imagine? Could, as many researchers believe, vines and other plants be sentient beings capable of displaying conscious choice?
I believe plants can sense. Now, whether they can sense precisely our thoughts or the thoughts of other animals around them really remains to be proven. So I wouldn't go so far as saying that, yeah, they have the ESP and everything. However, what I definitely can say is they would be influenced very easily by changes in their environment, and that maybe reflects to a certain extent the thought process. We do not know.
Jay Deep and his assistant Zach are going to put the sentient being theory to the test. They're going to hook up this plant to a state-of-the-art polygraph. Sensors will read the subtle changes in the plant's electrical activity to see how it responds to various stimuli. If there's a noticeable spike in the plant's electrical activity, then that would suggest that the plant can read human thoughts.
I'm absolutely curious about what is the outcome from this particular experiment, because it might actually be an opening for the way my own research direction that will move into. Because if there's a positive response, I would really love to follow that up in a more scientific manner.
For their first experiment, they're going to test what many gardeners believe to be a fact, that plants respond well to human touch.
Lightly brushing the leaves and the stems of the plant.
No, sorry, Zach.
But there's no response. Now they're going to attempt what few scientists have ever tried before.
Threatening thoughts.
They're going to see if plants have ESP.
No response so far?
That's all I got, yeah. We haven't gotten any responses yet, eh?
Since there's no response, Jay Deep and Zach are going to raise the intensity of their next experiment. They're going to threaten the plant with violence.
Cut plant. Hold on. So as soon as you were on the way to cut it, there's a huge spike. That's really interesting because it was at a lower level, spiked up, came down, went up again, and then has now started resting at another level. So the spike actually comes prior to your action.
Amazingly, before he could cut the plant, there's a noticeable spike on the lie detector indicating a physiological response by the plant. That would suggest that the plant could read Zach's mind.
This was almost the perfect moment for a plant to have become anxious when you reached it with the scissors with a very clear intention, at least in your mind, unspoken. So, again, maybe we are looking at something real. Scientifically speaking, this hardly would count as a result unless we could repeat it multiple times. But the fact is, and it comes as a major surprise to me, because I was not expecting this at all. And we had already gone through one plant and looked at the other one and gone through different situations where we realized this is not happening. And then suddenly, when Zach moves in with a scissor, and I guess with a very clear intention of carrying the threat out, there is a very, very clear spike.
So, if human beings are ever going to prove plants are sentient or have ESP, more research needs to be done. If it's ever proven true, the implications would be enormous. It would shake the very foundations of our human existence and necessitate a dramatic change in the way we relate with this mysterious species. Is that weird or what? So, 3 weird mysteries. A multitude of even weirder possible explanations. A woman materializes from nowhere into an LA bathroom. Did she use a wormhole to travel through time? Did she travel faster than light speed? Is any of this possible? A mysterious stone structure in New England, proof that the ancient Celts settled the United States? Was this built by Native Americans? Or was it created in more recent times as a booze-making factory? Vines in Italy seemingly respond to the sounds of Mozart. Are plants sentient beings with human feelings and desires? You decide.